Hello, friends. We are approaching the holiday of Shavuot, during which we celebrate the receiving of the Torah. I have a personal story that I would like to share with you. It's one of those stories that's difficult to share because its content is, defies normal experience. However, I have shared versions of this story with our community in the past, though I don't think I fully shared the part that kind of crosses over into what we might call the mystical. There are ways to explain the story as a wild endorphin-enhanced adrenaline rush, but I would prefer not to rationalize or explain away an experience that I hold as sacred and am simply unwilling to try to make sense of. So here it is, in honor of my deep connection to Torah and the great mystery. In order to provide a little background, you need to know that dance has always been an important pathway to extra-rational experiences for me. Growing up, one of my favorite moments of the year was always Simchat Torah, the Jewish holiday in which we celebrate the completion of the annual cycle of reading the Torah and immediately begin again. Follows the high holidays, as many of you know. When I was a kid, my siblings and I went to the Hebrew Academy of Cleveland, which was an ultra-Orthodox yeshiva whose rabbis had escaped from Lithuania during the Second World War and reestablished the yeshiva in a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio. On Simchat Torah, the sanctuary of my Orthodox shul was packed with people shoulder to shoulder. When the dancing started, if you were in the room, you were dancing whether you wanted to dance or not, because the wooden floor was moving up and down with the weight of the bodies flying across the room. The dancing was the most intense experience of what in our tradition is called dveikut, losing oneself in communion with the divine. We would often dance for 5 or 6 hours, way past exhaustion, into an expanded state of consciousness that I had simply had no words for as a child, but loved it so deeply and looked forward to it every year. So fast forward to 1975, I was in Jerusalem on my junior year abroad at Hebrew University. During that year, my habit was to attend different synagogues in Jerusalem on Shabbat and on holidays to sample the different countries, different cultures, different flavors of Judaism that abound in Jerusalem. I had heard that there was a particular synagogue in the center of the city that was a really good place to go to on Simchat Torah. Not so much because of what happened inside the synagogue, but rather that it was a meeting place for all the synagogues in the center of the town of Jerusalem for dancing outside in a large traffic circle, which was, of course, closed on the holiday. So the morning service was a normal Simchat Torah gathering, but when the service ended, the Torah was taken out of the building and the dancing began in this very large traffic circle. Groups from nearby synagogues arrived with their Torah scrolls, and soon there were hundreds of people in this circle dancing with the Torahs. Tradition was that when the Torah was outside, several men held the talit over the Torah as it was being danced around the circle. After about an hour of dancing, someone decided that it was time to move our dancing celebration down to the old city in front of the Western Wall, the Kotel. I was handed handed a corner of a talit covering one of the Torah scrolls, and we began dancing down towards the old city. As we moved through a part of the city that was, I would say, light industrial / residential, it's a poorer part of Jerusalem. There were sukkot built up on the balconies on both sides of the streets. And since it was the afternoon of a holiday, and we just come through Sukkot, the Sukkot were filled with people. There were wild sounds, ululations, and showers of candy that poured down us as we danced towards the old city. Soon we reached Zion Gate, one of the main entrances to the old city of Jerusalem, and entered the ancient part of Jerusalem. As we danced down one of the main thoroughfares, the Arab shopkeepers looked at us with quite quizzically, and they were eager to have us pass so that they could continue selling their wares to the bewildered tourists who had no idea what was going on. We took a right turn and headed into the Jewish quarter, and again, there were sukkot overhead on all the balconies. There was singing above and below, and we danced on the smooth ancient stones as our ancestors had done for countless generations. The tight quarters gave way to an expanse as we moved towards the immense square approaching the Western Wall. There were already thousands of people dancing in front of the Kotel, and streams coming in from 3 directions, men dancing with Torahs, a confluence of humanity, fully alive and inspired with the ruach, the profound joy of this holy day of celebration. While smaller circles of dancing were already happening, as tens of thousands of people, in fact, the paper the next day estimated over 100,000 of us were there, filling the large area in front of the Kotel, the Western Wall. And several people seemed to be organizing this chaotic, buzzing, massive beehive of people ever growing. Many of the Torah scrolls that had been brought from synagogues all over Jerusalem had been placed on tables near the wall. And there were 4 Torahs held by individuals. One of them was the Torah I had helped hold the talit over as we danced down from the new city of Jerusalem. All at once, everyone began singing one song, one pulsing song traditionally sung on Simchat Torah. And everyone was singing it at the top of their lungs. The men holding the 4 Torahs at the center each began dancing away from the center in each direction, and the large crowd behind danced backwards. So it was kind of like the whole middle opened up. Then when it seemed like there was no more room for the compressed mass of people, the men holding 2 of the Torahs facing each other would begin to dance wildly towards the middle. And the crowds behind these 2 men filled the space, just danced towards them. Now, as the 2 Torah scrolls approached one another, the men carrying them would begin to leap into the air. They were defying gravity, holding the scrolls high above their heads, and the singing reached a fever pitch. When the 2 men came together, they would abruptly whirl about as if turning on the men that they had led towards the center. And all of the men would turn and head back from where they came. And the whole walls would contract. And when they were as far back as they could go, the 2 men standing on the other side would dance towards the middle. And this mass of men would do that, would come together And this, you know, it was like some kind of giant accordion that would expand and contract, expand and contract, and in this wild organic fashion. And from the beginning, I had been near one of the four moving wall of bodies, and at some point, without any preparation or movement on my part, one of the Torahs was thrust into my hands. I was wholly unprepared, but I accepted the honor. And when large groups on the we were pressed here, and when these large groups on the other axis danced back, with no I felt lifted up by the current of song and energy, and I began dancing forward. And with little sensed intention and no will, I leapt into the air, and I was hurtling higher than I felt I had ever jumped, notwithstanding the Torah held in my arms. Actually, I have to say that it felt as if the Torah was propelling me forward, lifting me off the ground, taking me higher. I didn't look down to check my landing. The Torah seemed to be communicating with the earth below, urging it up to reach me and catch my feet as they returned from their flight. I can't tell you how long I held the Torah, how long I led the thousands behind me back and forth, but I do have this very strange and inexplicable memory of all of a sudden ascending, leaving my body. Without any warning, I was given a view of the proceedings from way up in the air. I was looking down on this hypnotic movement of pure ecstasy. I saw myself down below, leaping and dancing with a look on my face that was pure bliss. I could hear the sound as if it was far away down below, and there was an inner calm that I had never experienced. And just as quickly as I had ascended, I was back in my body, and the volume was back on full blast. When I danced the men in my sprawling column back away from the center, I was suddenly guided to hand off the Torah to another person who joyfully accepted it and continued this wild, sacred dance. When the energy was fully expressed, again, this was all occurring in timeless time, sacred time, completely without regard to normal temporal categories. And with no apparent direction, the dancers slowly started to disperse. The music came down, the singing, the volume was sort of returned to normal, and I suddenly realized that I and everyone else around me was drenched in sweat. I was just a pool of water. And I looked around, and we all had these amazing smiles plastered on our faces, and no one seemed able to speak. We had all experienced something incredible, unbelievable. People wandered around the Kotel Square. I remember standing stock still, trying to process what had just occurred. These words seem incapable of capturing the enormity of the experience. All I know is that when I made my way back to my apartment in Jerusalem, I was flush with a fever, and I slept for most of the next 2 days. Friends asked me how I had spent Simchat Torah, and I found myself saying it was simply the most beautiful Simchat Torah I had ever experienced. So as we approach this holiday of Shavuot, a time of honoring the Torah, I wanted to honor the power of Torah to lift us up, to transform our lives in ways that are sometimes beyond normal perception. Keni Ratzon, so may it be. Stay safe and be well. Shalom uvracha, peace and blessings.